In Beirut, the death toll from Sunday's terrorist bombings moved higher. The number of dead U.S. Marines, sailors, and soldiers is now a confirmed 214. The number of dead French military men stands at 38. At the area around the destroyed U.S. military headquarters today, the Marines went into their highest state of alert, ordered into bunkers, directed to shoot to kill. More on the alert from Tom Fenton.
Marines sealed off their base after reports that 3 vehicles packed with explosives were circling nearby neighborhoods. The tension could be felt as guards kept their weapons at the ready and other Marines took shelter. Vehicles in the area were carefully checked, while Marines and rescue workers continued to sift through the rubble of Sunday's explosion. Bodies were still being found. A young Lebanese woman who had recently married an American serviceman left grief-stricken after visiting the scene where he died. The serviceman had decided to return to Beirut from his honeymoon one day early and was killed in the blast. Later today, the commandant of the Marine Corps arrived in Beirut to review security for the Marines.
I have been here twice in the last several months. I've looked at the security measures and have been most satisfied. I think one has to realize that if you have a determined individual who is willing to risk his life, or rather give up his life in a situation like this, that chances are he's going to get through and do that.
General Kelly will stay for several days. While he's here, he may also study the role of the American contingent in the peacekeeping force. Any major change in the role of the multinational force would have far-reaching implications. Expansion of its area of operations could mean sending in many more men, and a shift to an offensive role would mean becoming an active participant in what is still a Lebanese civil war. The 2,000-man French contingent is already stretched to the limit trying to police downtown Beirut. The French, too, are still uncovering bodies, but there is no hope of finding any more alive. The Americans, like the French, are now getting near the end. They are approaching the bottom of the rubble where more Marines still lay buried. Tom Fenton, CBS News, Beirut.
There are about 6,300 miles between Grenada and Lebanon, and in his commentary tonight, Bill Moyers finds those nations are not only miles apart, but worlds apart. Bill?
In a world where freedom has enemies, the use of force can be justified. The question is always when and where. Not all our enemies can harm us equally, and we ought to be careful to expend our treasure and lives on those who can truly hurt us. There's no satisfactory justification for the loss of all those Marines in Beirut in a cause so far removed from our national security. We have interests there, but they're poorly served by assigning men to a dubious mission exposed to factions of rival cutthroats, murderous gangs, and swarms of religious fanatics. If our credibility is at stake in Lebanon, as the President says, it's not enhanced by folly. Grenada, on the other hand, is not Lebanon. You can argue that a tiny island with a leftist government could scarcely have been more than a nuisance, if that. But then that huge airstrip appeared, built with Soviet and Cuban help, and harder-line Marxists trained in Cuba threw out the hardliners already in power. There followed a bloodletting similar to the one Marxists had already inflicted on opponents in nearby Suriname. You can hardly blame the peaceful islands around Grenada for being alarmed, or an American president for imagining the strategic consequences of yet another Soviet base in the Caribbean. John Kennedy almost went to war to get Soviet missiles out of Cuba, and Lyndon Johnson sent some 20,000 troops, of whom 28 died, to prevent a communist takeover in the Dominican Republic. So it's not surprising that Mr. Reagan would also consider the use of force legitimate in the Caribbean. Whether the price was worth it depends on whether the result is to replace their thugs, as Mr. Reagan calls them, with our thugs, as happened in Guatemala and Chile, or whether the people of Grenada really get their freedom back. If this happens, there will be no less grief for the next of kin of the troops who died in Grenada than for those slain in Beirut. But at least they can say, mission accomplished. Dan.
Thank you, Bill. We'll have more of the day's news in a moment, and tonight at 11:30, 10:30 Central Time, CBS News will present a special broadcast on today's invasion of Grenada.